All right, we just have a little bit left on our notes here. So we're going to go through this part. I know that first one's a little long, so I could get you some direction or some examples in. All right, 3 things that are found in all types of cakes, regardless of what kind you're making, is flour, some kind of sweetener, such as sugar, and some part of the eggs. Remember, the white cakes and a sponge or foam cake will not use the yolk, but it will at least use the white. Okay, first of all, flour provides the structure. The 2 basic types of flour you use in baking cakes is all-purpose, which is just what it sounds like. It's the most purposeful and most popular, and cake flour. Now, real briefly, cake flour is what makes those cakes that you buy at the bakery so delicate, and just when you bite into them, they just melt in your mouth. And the reason is because of the gluten content. And I know when we hear gluten these days, all we think of is gluten-free and eating gluten-free. In baking, gluten is what makes something elastic. When you mix flour and water and make pizza dough, and then you roll it out and it snaps back together, that's the gluten. Okay, obviously you don't want your cake to be stretchy and have that tough texture like an Italian bread would. You want to lower gluten so that when you mix it with your liquid, it doesn't make that tough texture. So that lower gluten content in cake flour is what makes them so delicate. Now, you can substitute all-purpose flour in, but you do need to remove a little bit of the flour to make it more delicate. Also, sifting the flour would help too. Sweeteners, they improve flavor, texture, and help with browning. If you make some kind of cake and it doesn't look the right color, you might have missed some of your sugar. There's several different types of sugar you can use. Here is a website that has some visuals of them. We see, this is a real raw sugar here, granulated sugar, brown, which is white sugar, brown sugar, which is a little less processed, powdered sugar, which is typically used in your frosting, molasses, which is so thick. That's a strong flavor that's used in a lot of gingerbread recipes. Here's a syrup, honey, or even an agave nectar you could use, which is a even healthier substitute for honey. Corn syrup, which is like a liquid sugar. Those are just some examples of different sweeteners that you could use. You can use sugar substitutes, like Splenda makes a baking sugar substitute, but make sure that it is specifically designed for baking. You can't just open 3 equal packs and expect it to work the same as normal sweeteners would. Eggs improve flavor, nutrients, richness, color, and structure. Do remember that if you're choosing to substitute egg whites for the whole egg, if the recipe doesn't specifically tell you to do that, 2 egg whites is equivalent to the volume of 1 whole egg. A fourth of an egg substitute, like egg beaters, will do the same, but when you take that yolk out, you are going to lose some of the color and the flavor and the richness that it would have contributed. Fats, we learned so much about these our last chapter, but they do add richness, flavor, and tenderness. Remember, the fats that you substitute in and out are going to affect the quality, like we learned in our cookie lab, and the difference between shortening and margarine. Also, remember the different brands of margarine have different contents of air and water and oil, so they will bake out differently. Just so you know, in class when we use margarine, we typically use imperial margarine. So if you're happy with those products, that's what we typically go for. When you're cooking with a liquid fat, most oils will work, although they should be mild in flavor. Common baking oils are a veggie oil or a canola oil. Coconut oil is becoming more common, but it does have a strong flavor to it. Olive oil is something that's typically used for cooking, not so much for baking as well. Substitutes. We talked in class about using applesauce as a substitute in baking. Here's a website that'll show you several different things that you could use to make healthier. They're talking about brownies here, but you could try it in cakes as well. This is just explaining the applesauce and how you don't typically substitute straight amounts for amounts. Like if it calls for oil, you don't use the same amount of applesauce. You can pause the screen and read more about it if you want, but I'm going to go ahead and go on. Okay, other fat substitutes, pureed dried fruits, prunes are often used. We even talked about black beans, that you can use those. Pureed black beans as a fat substitute. Okay, liquid provides moisture and helps blend ingredients. The most common baking liquid is milk. We talked about buttermilk. That's what we use in our chocolate cake. That helps give it that really distinct, rich flavor. A lot of people don't keep buttermilk on hand, so you can use a substitute called sour milk. Remember, we talked in class how to make sour milk. You take about a tablespoon of lemon juice. They're actually using a real lemon to squeeze the juice here. You could use store-bought lemon juice as well, or you could use white vinegar. And you put it in a liquid measuring cup. and then add enough milk to get up to the 1 cup line. Stir it and let it sit, and it will curdle and operate as buttermilk for you. Okay, leavening agents are what makes cake rise and become light and porous. Typically, butter or shortened cakes use chemical leaveners like baking powder or baking soda. Remember, I told you baking powder has what it already needs to activate, and baking soda needs some kind of something in the recipe, an acidic liquid or product that will make it activate. Sponge cakes, we see that you use the air and steam leaveners. I went all through that process. If you want to scroll back and listen to that again in the last video. Okay, the mixing methods. The standard and the one bowl are the 2 methods we use. Please remember that I told you if you focus on the first step of each, that will help cue you in to what they are. Creaming the fat and sugar is the first step of the standard, and then that operates more like the cookie method, okay, where you cream the fat and sugar, add the eggs one at a time. You slowly have sifted your dry ingredients and slowly add that and alternate with your milk and continue doing that till your batter is done. The one bowl, you start with your dry ingredients and you just add things to that same bowl. All right, I am just going to stop here. I know you have more parts of your notes. I'm going to flash those on the screen, and in the last video, that'll just be a couple seconds, and you can pause and fill those out as you need to fill your final notes in.